Meghan is livid. Harry has met someone who is his age, with whom he is in love, and who is in love with him.
She found the text on his phone. That is how Meghan Markle reportedly discovered that Prince Harry, her husband, the man who walked away from Buckingham Palace and the British royal family for her, had formed a deep emotional connection with another woman, not through a whispered warning from an aide, not through a tabloid headline. She picked up his phone, and according to one of the most connected royal biographers alive, Lady Colin Campbell, the truth was right there in the messages. Stay with me on this one, because by the end, I am going to walk you through every thread of this story, including the one detail about Harry's past that explains why this pattern was almost mathematically inevitable, and nobody is talking about it. Now, let me set the stage properly, because the person making these claims is not some anonymous account farming clicks. Lady Colin Campbell is a woman who has spent over 3 decades operating at the intersection of royal access and public truth-telling. Her 1992 biography of Princess Diana hit the New York Times bestseller list. She has authored 7 unauthorized books on the British royal family, including a volume specifically examining the relationship between Harry and Meghan called Meghan and Harry: The Real Story. She has connections stretching from palace corridors in London to private estates in Beverly Hills. She has been sued. She has been threatened with legal action more times than most people change their passwords. And she keeps talking. That alone should tell you something. When Lady Colin Campbell sat down on a well-known podcast and opened her mouth, she prefaced her remarks with 4 words that the British press treats like a flare gun fired across a dark sky. "You cannot sue me." Think about what that means. She calculated the legal exposure. She weighed the risk of defamation proceedings, the cost of reputational damage, the machinery that Meghan Markle and Prince Harry have shown they are willing to deploy against unfavorable coverage. And she decided that the substance of what she was about to say could withstand all of it. That is not the behavior of someone guessing. That is the behavior of someone who has receipts. So here is what she said. And I want you to listen carefully to the architecture of the language, because Lady Colin Campbell speaks the way a chess grandmaster plays, every word placed with intention. She stated that Prince Harry has met someone, a woman his own age, a woman who is in love with him, and with whom, according to sources she described as having connections at the United States government level, he is deeply, genuinely in love right back. She paused. She inserted the word "if." She specified that she had deliberately avoided the word affair. But then she painted every single brushstroke that surrounds an affair, sketching the entire portrait without naming the canvas. And when she finished, she smiled and suggested someone should probably open a bottle of champagne to calm the room down. That is Lady Colin Campbell, precise, devastating, and absolutely aware of the grenade she just placed on the table. But here is the part that makes this something more than palace gossip, and I need you to pay close attention because this is where the picture sharpens into something genuinely uncomfortable. When a journalist pressed Lady Colin Campbell further in a follow-up conversation, more details emerged. The mystery woman, according to the sources Lady Colin Campbell cited, is not someone on the margins of Harry's life. She lives in or around the Montecito environment. For those unfamiliar, Montecito is the exclusive enclave in California where Harry and Meghan Markle purchased their estate. It is a community built on extraordinary wealth, old money and new money and celebrity money, where privacy is bought alongside the real estate and discretion functions as a form of social currency. This woman, whoever she is described as financially secure, well-connected, someone who understands the world Harry now occupies. Someone who moves in circles of power and money and fame without being consumed by them. Not a random encounter, not a brief crossing of paths at some gala, someone from Harry's actual orbit. And then came the detail that stopped the room cold. Nobody knows how long this has been going on. Let that sentence sit with you for a moment, because it rearranges the entire timeline of everything you have been watching unfold publicly over the past 12 months. If this connection is not a recent development, if it predates the solo trips, the separate schedules, the growing visible distance between Harry and Meghan, then every public moment you have observed starts to look different. The pieces realign. The pattern sharpens into something more coherent and frankly more painful. Every solo red carpet, every overseas trip taken alone, every photograph where one of them is conspicuously absent from the other's side, all of it stops looking like scheduling conflicts and starts looking like something being carefully managed behind the scenes. That is the weight of that single sentence. It does not just reframe the present, it retroactively rewrites the past year. And here's the part most people get completely wrong about this story. They treat it as a single revelation, a bombshell, something that exploded out of nowhere. But it did not come from nowhere. It came from a trail of publicly visible evidence that has been accumulating for over a year. Let me walk you through it. Over the past 12 months, Harry and Meghan have been constructing increasingly separate public lives. Not the kind of separation you would expect from two busy people who simply have different professional commitments on a given Tuesday. This is a pattern, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Meghan traveled to Geneva for a solo appearance. She went to Chicago on her own. She attended a museum gala without Harry. She walked a red carpet alone. She appeared at a children's hospital fundraiser, a charity pledge dinner, and a tribute event honoring Tyler Perry, all without her husband beside her. One tabloid reported that Harry and Meghan had not been photographed together publicly for more than 40 days. 40 days. For a couple who once told the world, on camera, to Oprah Winfrey, that they were inseparable. Meanwhile, Harry has been making repeated solo trips back to the United Kingdom, multiple visits, all without Meghan, all without their children, Archie and Lilibet. He keeps returning to Britain, a country he once publicly described as unsafe for his family, a country he left amid enormous public upheaval, and every time he comes back, observers have noted the same thing. He looks lighter, more relaxed, more like the Harry people remember from before. That observation alone should make you stop and ask questions, and if it does not, what I am about to tell you about the Paris incident will. In late 2024, Meghan attended Paris Fashion Week. She was photographed relaxing in the back of a chauffeured car, feet up, filming herself as the city lights rolled past the window. She posted the footage to her Instagram. It looked like a casual travel diary moment, a glamorous woman enjoying a glamorous city. Except multiple observers quickly pointed out something that turned the whole clip into an entirely different kind of moment. The route she was traveling appeared to pass directly through the area near the Pont de l'Alma tunnel. For anyone who might not immediately recognize that name, let me be plain. That is the location where Princess Diana died in August of 1997, Harry's mother, the woman whose violent public death shaped everything about who Harry became. Prince Harry has spoken publicly, repeatedly, and with enormous emotional weight about what his mother's death did to him. He has said that stories involving cars, photographers, and Paris at night continue to haunt him. He was 12 years old when she died. He walked behind her coffin at a funeral watched by over 2 billion people around the world. He has spent decades processing that grief in public view. And there was his wife, filming her shoes in the back of a chauffeured car, posting footage from the very area where Diana's life ended, as if it were an aesthetic moment for social media. Her team later said she had not realized where she was. I want you to sit with that for a moment. A woman married to a man whose single most defining trauma is his mother's death in a Paris tunnel, traveling through that exact area and reportedly not knowing. You either believe that explanation or you do not. But here is what I know from years of watching these circles operate. People in Meghan's position do not travel without advance teams. Routes are planned. Locations are scouted. Context is considered. That is the baseline protocol for anyone at her level of public visibility. So the question is not really whether she knew. The question is how it is possible that nobody in her professional orbit flagged it before she pressed record. That failure, whether it was genuine ignorance or something more calculated, tells you something about the ecosystem around her. And it fed directly into the growing sense among observers that the official version of events and the reality of this marriage were pulling further and further apart. But all of that, the solo appearances, the Paris footage, the 40-day gap, that is just the visible surface. What I have not told you yet is the historical pattern buried underneath all of this. And it involves a woman named Chelsea Davy, a relationship that lasted 7 years, and a devastating admission Harry made under oath that connects everything you are seeing right now to something that happened over a decade ago. And almost nobody is drawing the line. Before Meghan, before the Netflix deal, before the Oprah interview heard around the world, before the memoir titled Spare became one of the fastest-selling nonfiction books in publishing history, there was Chelsea Davy. She was Harry's most significant relationship before Meghan Markle. They dated on and off for the better part of 7 years, making it one of the longest and most meaningful romances of his life. Chelsea was raised in Zimbabwe. People who knew them described her as laid back, unimpressed by royal formality, someone who made Harry laugh in a way the Buckingham Palace atmosphere rarely allowed. She was not interested in the spotlight. She did not seek it. And that, according to Harry's own testimony during his legal cases against British tabloids, is part of what the relentless media coverage destroyed. Harry spoke in court about how intrusive tabloid coverage of his relationship with Chelsea Davy created a level of suspicion and paranoia that he could not manage. He described a tracking device that was allegedly found on her car. He talked about private arguments becoming newspaper headlines the following morning. He used the word nightmare. He said that the coverage made Chelsea question what was real and what was performance, and that it slowly corroded the trust between them until there was nothing left to hold on to. That testimony was given under oath. It was not a memoir passage crafted for sympathy. It was a man sitting in a courtroom describing, in legal terms, how public scrutiny destroyed the most important relationship of his early adult life. He lost Chelsea, at least in part, because the machinery of royal scrutiny ground the relationship down until it could not survive. Then came Cressida Bonus, blonde, aristocratic, connected through mutual friends to Harry's social circle. By multiple accounts, she genuinely cared for him. But Cressida watched what had happened to Chelsea. She saw the tabloid frenzy, the paparazzi stakeouts, the front page dissections of every outfit and every expression and every perceived slight. And she made a calculation that was entirely rational and entirely heartbreaking. She decided that loving Prince Harry was not worth the cost of being consumed by the machinery that surrounds him. 2 women, 2 relationships broken by the same forces. And that is the context you need to hold in your mind as we talk about what happened next. And then came Meghan Markle. And Harry did something that no senior member of the British royal family had done in modern history. He walked away. He stepped back from royal duties. He relocated his entire life across an ocean to Montecito, California. He chose, openly and publicly, a life on his own terms. The fairy tale version of that story, the version presented in the Oprah interview on CBS that was watched by approximately 49 million people worldwide, through the Netflix documentary series Harry and Meghan, through the memoir Spare, which sold over 3 million copies in its first week of release, was that Prince Harry had finally broken free. He had escaped the system that destroyed his previous relationships. He had found the person he was meant to be with, and he was building something entirely new, something authentic, something free from the constraints that had suffocated every other connection he had tried to build. Do you remember that Oprah interview, March 2021? Harry and Meghan sitting on those garden chairs, telling the world about racism within the palace, about mental health struggles, about being cut off financially. It was a cultural earthquake. It drew more American viewers than the Super Bowl halftime show that year. It repositioned the Sussexes as sympathetic rebels fighting a calcified institution, and for a while the narrative held. The world bought it. But narratives need maintenance. They need the lived reality to match the presented version. And slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the gap between the two started to widen. But here is the thread that almost nobody is pulling on, and this is where my analysis parts ways with most of the coverage you will find on this story. Harry did not escape the cage. He relocated it. Think about this carefully. He left Buckingham Palace and its surveillance culture, its rigid protocols, its relentless media scrutiny. And what did he build in Montecito? A $16 million estate surrounded by cameras of a different kind. Content cameras, brand cameras, Netflix cameras, filming a documentary series about their private life, a podcast deal, a memoir that disclosed intimate details of his family relationships for public consumption, an Instagram presence, a lifestyle brand. The scrutiny did not stop when Harry left the royal family. The scrutiny simply got repackaged as content, and that repackaging was voluntary. That distinction matters enormously. When Harry was a working royal, the surveillance was imposed on him. He did not choose it. The tabloids hounded him. The paparazzi followed him. The system demanded his compliance. In California, the surveillance was chosen. He and Meghan signed the deals. They invited the cameras. They published the stories. And yet, the fundamental tension, the one that destroyed his relationship with Chelsea Davy, the one that made life with Cressida Bonus unsustainable, the one that he described under oath as a nightmare, remained exactly the same. A man being watched when he does not want to be watched. A man performing a version of himself for an audience when he might prefer to simply exist. The setting changed. The architecture of the trap did not. This is what I call the gilded cage relocation thesis, and it is the key to understanding everything Lady Colin Campbell is describing. Harry left one gilded cage and built another. The first was made of duty and tradition. The second is made of content and commerce. And if her sources are correct, he may now be discovering what his father, King Charles, discovered decades ago inside a very different cage. That sometimes the person you chose to share the cage with is not the person who helps you breathe. Which brings us to the comparison that nobody in Harry's inner circle wants spoken aloud, but which Lady Colin Campbell herself raised with unmistakable deliberateness: King Charles and Princess Diana. The parallel is uncomfortable. It is one that Harry would almost certainly reject outright. But the commentators who have raised it are pointing to something real, and it connects to a psychological pattern that family therapists have a specific term for: repetition compulsion. The unconscious tendency to recreate the dynamics of your earliest formative experiences, even when you are actively trying to break free from them. Consider the structural resemblances. Charles married Diana in a union that captivated the entire world. The public adored her. She was magnetic, photogenic, a global figure who drew attention wherever she went. Behind the scenes, by both their accounts, the relationship fractured under the weight of incompatible expectations, relentless public scrutiny, and a growing emotional distance that neither could bridge. Charles found comfort in a connection with someone else, Camilla Parker Bowles, a woman who understood his world intimately and who offered something the marriage could not. The marriage endured publicly for years after it had ended privately. The separation, when it finally came, reshaped the monarchy itself. Now place Harry's situation beside that framework. Harry married Meghan in a wedding watched by nearly 2 billion people globally. The public was captivated. She was magnetic, photogenic, a global figure who commanded attention. Behind the scenes, if the pattern of public evidence and Lady Colin Campbell's sources are any indication, the relationship may have developed fractures under the weight of incompatible expectations, relentless scrutiny both imposed and self-generated, and a growing emotional distance visible to anyone paying attention. And now, according to Lady Colin Campbell, Harry has found comfort in a connection with someone else, a woman who understands his world, a woman who offers something the current arrangement does not. The structural echo is almost eerie, and the psychological literature on repetition compulsion tells us that these patterns are not coincidences. They are the architecture of unresolved grief and unprocessed childhood experience expressing themselves across generations. Harry lost his mother to a marriage that failed publicly and catastrophically. He spent his entire adult life determined to write a different story. And yet the story, if Lady Colin Campbell is correct, may be writing him. Now here is something else that deserves your attention, because the public reaction to this story is in many ways more revealing than the story itself. When relationship scandals hit social media, the typical pattern is immediate and predictable. Shock, outrage, fierce tribal division, people pick sides, they defend or attack. That is not what happened when Lady Colin Campbell's claims started circulating. What happened was something I have rarely seen at this scale. The dominant reaction, the response that accumulated thousands of likes and shares across platforms, was two words: saw it coming. Not surprise, not moral condemnation, not disbelief. A quiet, almost weary recognition. One widely shared comment asked who would even want to get involved with Harry at this point, adding that the commenter was not sure even Meghan seemed particularly interested anymore. Another joked that if Harry were the last man standing, they would still pass. People responded with memes, with the particular brand of dry humor that British internet culture does better than anyone else on the planet. But underneath that humor was something that cut to the bone. The laughter was not about Harry as a person. The laughter was the exhale of millions of people who had spent years watching something being presented one way while sensing it was another way entirely. Years of curated images and official statements and Netflix specials about unity and purpose, set against the slowly accumulating evidence of separate schedules, solo appearances, and a growing chasm between the brand and the reality. When Lady Colin Campbell spoke, she did not shock people. She gave language to something people had already been processing in silence. And that kind of confirmation, the kind that does not surprise but instead clarifies, often hits harder than any bombshell could, because it means the instinct was right all along. There is a concept in behavioral psychology called the availability cascade. It describes what happens when a privately held suspicion suddenly receives public validation. Once one credible voice says the thing out loud, every person who had been thinking it quietly suddenly feels permission to say it too, and the conversation accelerates exponentially. That is exactly what Lady Colin Campbell triggered. Not a new thought, a released one. Years of suppressed observation flooding into the open all at once. And the speed at which it spread tells you something about the volume of suppressed observation that was already there, waiting for someone with enough credibility and enough legal armor to strike the match. And now I need to tell you about the detail that ties every single one of these threads together. The one observation that transforms this from royal gossip into something genuinely significant about how public narratives fracture and why some marriages become performances long before anyone admits it. The real story here is not about whether Harry has a new romantic interest. It is not about whether Meghan knew or did not know about the texts. It is not even about Lady Colin Campbell's credibility, though her track record speaks volumes. The real story is about what has happened to Prince Harry himself. People who have followed him for decades, people inside royal circles and outside them, talk about a clear before and after. Before, the laughing, slightly reckless prince who was arguably the most universally beloved member of the modern British royal family, a man who buried his mother at 12 years old and still carried warmth and humor through decades of public life, a soldier who served 2 tours in Afghanistan, the founder of the Invictus Games, an event that connected him with wounded veterans around the world in ways that moved hardened journalists to tears, a man who radiated something that the palace machinery could not manufacture, genuine human warmth. After, a man who appears, and I say this as observation, not diagnosis, more guarded, more serious, quieter in his presence, even when cameras are rolling. Look at photographs of Harry from 2012, the year of the London Olympics, the year he served his 2nd tour in Afghanistan with the Army Air Corps. There is a lightness in his face that is almost physically absent from recent images. One commentator described him as looking desperately lonely in California. Another said he appears weighed down in a way that the Harry of 15 years ago would find unrecognizable. Compare the man who danced with children at a charity event in Lesotho in 2013 with the man who walked a red carpet alone at a polo event last year. The difference is not just age. It is the difference between someone who is where they want to be and someone who is not entirely sure where they are anymore. When Harry wrote publicly last year that Britain will always be the country he proudly served, royal watchers read that sentence over and over, word by word. Because proud service does not sound like someone who happily walked away. It sounds like someone who misses something deeply and is choosing very particular words to manage how much of that feeling he is permitted to show. It sounds, if you listen carefully enough, like a man writing a letter to a country he still considers home while living in a house that does not quite feel like one. That transformation, that visible dimming of a man who once glowed in public spaces, is the context into which Lady Colin Campbell's claims landed, and it is why those claims did not produce shock. They produced something closer to sorrow, a sense that a man who tried desperately to rewrite his family's script ended up trapped in a variation of the same story, just in a different time zone with different cameras. So let me bring every thread together, because I promised you at the start that I would pay off every question this story raises, and I keep my promises. Lady Colin Campbell, a biographer with over 30 years of royal access and a legal confidence that suggests she is standing on solid ground, has stated on a public platform that Prince Harry has formed a deep emotional connection with a woman in or around Montecito, California, a woman his own age, a woman who is reportedly in love with him, a woman whose identity has been deliberately kept out of public discourse, and rightly so, because dragging an uninvolved individual into internet speculation would be deeply unfair, regardless of what is or is not happening. Meghan Markle reportedly discovered this through messages on Harry's phone. The timeline of the connection is unknown, which means it may predate the entire visible pattern of separation that the public has been watching for over a year. That pattern includes more than 40 days without a shared public appearance, solo trips by both Harry and Meghan to separate continents, the Paris tunnel incident that raised questions Meghan's team never adequately answered, and Harry's repeated solo returns to Britain, a country he once said was too dangerous for his family, looking lighter and more at ease each time. Harry's romantic history, specifically the 7-year relationship with Chelsea Davy that he described in sworn testimony as having been destroyed by the nightmare of media scrutiny, establishes a pattern that the current situation mirrors almost exactly. The Gilded Cage relocation thesis explains why. Harry did not escape the forces that broke his previous relationships, he relocated them. He traded imposed scrutiny for voluntary scrutiny, palace cameras for Netflix cameras, royal duty for content creation. The fundamental tension between a private man and a public life remained intact. And the parallel to his father, King Charles, who found emotional refuge outside his own high-profile marriage after years of growing distance, is too structurally precise to dismiss, however much Harry himself would surely want to. The public knew. That is the uncomfortable truth at the center of all of this. Not the specific details, not the name, not the texts, but the shape of the thing. The sense that the story being presented on camera did not match the story visible in the gaps between the cameras. Lady Colin Campbell did not break the news so much as she confirmed the draft that millions of people had already been writing in their heads. And that confirmation, quiet and measured and legally armored as it was, changed the conversation permanently. Now, I want to be precise about something because fairness demands it even in a story this charged. Lady Colin Campbell has not claimed a confirmed affair. She has not named a specific individual. She is working with sources she described as having connections at the United States government level, which is itself an extraordinary disclosure to make on a recorded platform. But sources are not proof. Reported claims are not established facts. The Sussexes have not responded publicly. Buckingham Palace has not responded. Nobody close to Harry has stepped forward to confirm or deny. That silence may mean nothing to confirm, or it may mean that confirming or denying would create complications of its own. What it means for us, right now, is that we are working with reported allegations and the weight of publicly observable evidence. I have presented both as clearly as I can, but verified or not, the claims landed on ground that had been prepared by years of observed behavior, accumulating questions, and the slow, steady erosion of a narrative that never quite felt complete. Prince Harry gave up an enormous amount to make this marriage work. His family, his country, his military identity, his position in one of the oldest institutions on Earth. The question that observers around the world are now asking, openly, is whether that sacrifice served the marriage it was made for, or whether it simply changed the setting in which the same tensions, the same isolation, the same distance between what is performed and what is felt were always going to surface. They produce something closer to sorrow, a sense that a man who tried desperately to rewrite his family's script ended up trapped in a variation of the same story, just in a different time zone with different cameras. So let me bring every thread together, because I promised you at the start that I would pay off every question this story raises, and I keep my promises. Lady Colin Campbell, a biographer with over 30 years of royal access and a legal confidence that suggests she is standing on solid ground, has stated on a public platform that Prince Harry has formed a deep emotional connection with a woman in or around Montecito, California, a woman his own age, a woman who is reportedly in love with him, a woman whose identity has been deliberately kept out of public discourse, and rightly so, because dragging an uninvolved individual into internet speculation would be deeply unfair regardless of what is or is not happening. Meghan Markle reportedly discovered this through messages on Harry's phone. The timeline of the connection is unknown, which means it may predate the entire visible pattern of separation that the public has been watching for over a year. That pattern includes more than 40 days without a shared public appearance, solo trips by both Harry and Meghan to separate continents, the Paris tunnel incident that raised questions Meghan's team never adequately answered, and Harry's repeated solo returns to Britain, a country he once said was too dangerous for his family, looking lighter and more at ease each time. Harry's romantic history, specifically the 7-year relationship with Chelsea Davy that he described in sworn testimony as having been destroyed by the nightmare of media scrutiny, establishes a pattern that the current situation mirrors almost exactly. The Gilded Cage relocation thesis explains why. Harry did not escape the forces that broke his previous relationships. He relocated them. He traded imposed scrutiny for voluntary scrutiny, palace cameras for Netflix cameras, royal duty for content creation. The fundamental tension between a private man and a public life remained intact. And the parallel to his father, King Charles, who found emotional refuge outside his own high-profile marriage after years of growing distance, is too structurally precise to dismiss, however much Harry himself would surely want to. The public knew that is the uncomfortable truth at the center of all of this. Not the specific details, not the name, not the texts, but the shape of the thing. The sense that the story being presented on camera did not match the story visible in the gaps between the cameras. Lady Colin Campbell did not break the news so much as she confirmed the draft that millions of people had already been writing in their heads. And that confirmation, quiet and measured and legally armored as it was, changed the conversation permanently. Now, I want to be precise about something, because fairness demands it even in a story this charged. Lady Colin Campbell has not claimed a confirmed affair. She has not named a specific individual. She is working with sources she described as having connections at the United States government level, which is itself an extraordinary disclosure to make on a recorded platform, but sources are not proof. Reported claims are not established facts. The Sussexes have not responded publicly. Buckingham Palace has not responded. Nobody close to Harry has stepped forward to confirm or deny. That silence may mean nothing to confirm, or it may mean that confirming or denying would create complications of its own. What it means for us, right now, is that we are working with reported allegations and the weight of publicly observable evidence. I have presented both as clearly as I can. But verified or not, the claims landed on ground that had been prepared by years of observed behavior, accumulating questions, and the slow, steady erosion of a narrative that never quite felt complete. Prince Harry gave up an enormous amount to make this marriage work. His family, his country, his military identity, his position in one of the oldest institutions on earth. The question that observers around the world are now asking, openly, is whether that sacrifice served the marriage it was made for, or whether it simply changed the setting in which the same tensions, the same isolation, the same distance between what is performed and what is felt were always going to surface. That question does not have a clean answer. Not yet. but it has millions of people asking it, and they are not going to stop. Because somewhere in the Golden Hills above Santa Barbara, in a community where privacy costs more than most people will earn in a lifetime, a man who once stood on the steps of a chapel and told the entire world he had found his person is now, if Lady Colin Campbell is to be believed, quietly reckoning with the possibility that the story he tried to write is not the story that is being written. And that might be the most royal thing about him. The inability to escape the pattern, no matter how far you run. I have one more thing to say, and it is not about Harry or Meghan or Lady Colin Campbell or a woman in Montecito whose name we do not know. It is about why this particular story moved faster and hit harder than almost any royal story in recent memory. It is because the audience was ahead of the narrator. For possibly the first time in the history of royal media coverage, the public had already assembled the picture before the source confirmed it. That is a fundamental shift. It means the old model, where palace sources controlled the timeline of revelation and managed public perception through carefully staged information releases, is finished. The audience watches in real time now. They compare notes across continents. They notice when schedules diverge and body language shifts and routes through Paris pass through the wrong tunnel. They do not need a biographer to tell them what they can see with their own eyes. They just need someone brave enough to say it out loud. Lady Colin Campbell was that someone, and whatever comes next, whether the Sussexes address these claims publicly or retreat further into strategic silence, one thing is already clear. The story of Harry and Meghan is no longer a love story being told to the world. It is a question being asked by the world. And the answer, when it finally comes, will not come from a palace spokesperson or a Netflix special or an Instagram post filmed in the back of a car. It will come from the two people at the center of it. And based on everything we have seen, everything Lady Colin Campbell has described, and everything the pattern of the last 12 months tells us, that answer may already be taking shape behind closed doors in Montecito. You just have not been told yet. But you already knew.